Hello, and welcome to another episode of Use Your Power. This episode is brought to you by Rev Up Texas, which stands for Register, Educate, and Vote. Use Your Power. Today, we are going to be talking about some more great organizations in Texas that will help you with civic engagement.
Let's get down to it. All right.
First, we spoke with Alex Burnell, the advocacy manager at Move Texas, a grassroots organization working to build power with underrepresented youth communities. Visually describing Alex as a Caucasian male with short brown hair and a beard wearing a baseball cap that says Move Texas, and his backdrop is his home library.
Yeah, well, my name is Alex Burnell. I'm the advocacy manager at Move Texas. If you don't know about Move Texas, we organize young people to participate in the political process in Texas. We do that in two ways, through voter registration and voter turnout work. We know that the youth population in Texas is the largest demographic. Nearly half of Texans are under the age of 30. So we know that this is a massive generation, but they don't always have the tools to get politically involved, politically motivated. So we target this group of folks because we know that they are the next generation of Texas, increasingly more diverse and younger, as I mentioned. So we do that work, and we also do policy work as well. The policy work is basically us understanding that not only do young voters want to vote, but oftentimes don't have the resources. They also have a lot of opinions. They're one of the most progressive generations in history, and they have opinions on criminal justice reform. They have opinions on climate justice. They have opinions on voting rights. And so we work in those issue areas to build basically young people's political skills, to win issue campaigns in those issue areas as well, because we also know that it's not just young people at the ballot box, but it's also young people in the streets. It's also young people in the policymaking space. And so we do that as well. We do that organizing in a couple different cities. We do it in San Antonio, we do it in Austin, we do it in San Marcos, we do it in Dallas, Houston, Corpus, Denton, a bunch of places all over the state where young people are at. We do it on college campuses at well over 70 here at Move Texas. And so that's just a little bit about what we do. Right now, we're in the middle of a legislative session. So we're organizing to stop voter suppression bills, try and pass smart climate legislation that looks at carbon across the state, and also provides recovery for folks who just suffered through the winter storm, as well as criminal justice reform efforts like bail reform, the George Floyd Act, cite and release expansion, things like that. So right now, my team, the advocacy team, is working through those pieces of legislation at the ledge. It's also municipal election time. And I was talking earlier about how young voters often don't have the information that they need to go and cast a ballot because our system is complicated. It's one of the arguments that we make at Move. You know, one of the main reasons young people don't vote is they say it's too hard. And so we're meant to, provide the resources to make it as easy as we can, given the systems that we have. And so over on our website, where you can go to movetexas.org /vote, you can see basically our resources that we provide to young people. This is everything from, what is a municipal election? Who's on the ballot? Is it your city council members? Is it your local district attorney? Is it some judges? So we do a little bit of an explanation of the type of race you're going to be voting in and why local races in particular are very important. You have a huge opportunity to impact your community locally, and you can see the impact of those issues you care about much more immediately than maybe you could at the federal level or another level of government. So we really emphasize that local voting in particular. So we have an explanation of what type of race it is, and then basic kind of civic 101 things like, what ID do I need to go vote? What polling location am I going to go to? So we talk about a plan to vote at Move Texas. And essentially what the plan to vote is, we know that it's a lot easier for folks to vote if they think through the steps in advance, because there are several steps. Again, Texas makes it complicated. So we know that one of the best ways we can ensure that people actually turn out is if they take a few minutes before, actually going to vote and making that plan to vote. So it talks also about what you need to go and do that. So we call that whole process the process of going through that information, making your plan to vote. And then finally, we know that voters actually want to know, who are the people that I'm voting for? Who are the people that are on my ballot? And so we've collected information from all the candidates this time around for Austin, for San Antonio and for Dallas. And what those videos that we've collected show is those candidates' positions on climate justice policy, on voting rights, and on democracy reform. So, do they think they have enough polling locations? Do they agree that there should be polling locations on college campuses? Things like that. And so those are just some of the tools that we use to accomplish our mission come election time. So if you check out that spot on our website, you'll see a Civics 101 section and kind of a make a plan to vote area where you can engage in local elections yourself really easy if you're a young person out there looking for resources. So as Move, right, we are, I think, very effective at mobilizing the young vote. We are record breaking. You can take a look at Move Texas's latest social media. We're talking about fighting for bills that would make campus polling locations mandatory and would make student ID voter ID. And we have a graphic that accompanies that advocacy effort. And that graphic is a collage of headlines. And all those headlines talk about how the Texas youth electorate is rising, how we're shattering records. And so we know as Move Texas that it's not just investment at election time, that it's not just investment by campaigns for a little bit of outreach and then you disappear and you can expect turnout to be historic. We know that you have to organize year round. You have to build a civic culture instead. So it can't just be kind of those transient investments during election time. You have to be building that power year round in community and on college campuses. So we focus on all elections, not only the on-cycle presidential elections, but some of those smaller races, those municipal races that are off-cycle as well, because we know that voter registration and voter turnout is a habit. So that civic culture has to be built, 24/7, 365 days a year. And I think the headlines really speak to the fact that over the years, we've been effective at forming that civic culture, at fighting back against voter suppression. And like states like Georgia, made Texas a contested space where it's not merely, just one class of people voting, but a whole new rising generation of people are voting as well.
We also spoke with Chase Bearden. Chase is the Deputy Executive Director at CTD, Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. CTD is the largest and oldest member-driven cross-disability organization. He is visually described as a Caucasian man with short blonde hair, beard with a little bit of gray, and his Zoom background is the office of CTD down in Austin.
Good afternoon, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the work CTD is doing, especially around voting. I think it's really important this day and age, but also, we hear every election that this is the election you have to vote in. And I think there's some falseness to that because really it never stops. Your civic duty is really to engage as much as you can and make sure your voice counts. At the end of the day, there's only a small population of the US that votes. And for the disability community, we are probably one of the groups that's the least represented, but we could be a very strong and powerful group if we were able to organize fully and actually have the disabled vote as a block. Our organization has been around since the late 70s, and ever since the beginning of that, it really has been a focus on access. Access to transportation, access to the community, access to healthcare, access to voting. And many of the advocates, not just CTD, but ADAPT and so many others, fought years before I was even injured and in a chair to make sure those basic rights were there. And then as the ADA and HAVA rolled out and voting became more and more accessible, since it was something that we really did back, and it was something that's been so close and dear to our hearts and our board, we've put a lot of emphasis into making sure that the disability community realizes that you can vote by mail, you can vote in person, The new voting machines are becoming more and more accessible, but sometimes that also takes teaching people how to use these new machines, and how to best utilize their time if they are going to the polling place, and how to figure out how to use early voting instead of waiting till election days, navigating how to apply for a mail-in ballot. The rules are changing all the time. And even right now with the legislature, we're seeing a lot of bills and legislation being put out that's going to greatly affect the disability community. And we're currently trying to reduce some of those barriers that they're putting in. And a big part of what we do and why we do it is we want people to have the right to cast an independent and secure ballot, not just have to have someone help you fill it out, but give you the right to cast that ballot independently. We feel like that's the most important thing a person can do. And we are working every day, especially for the next 30 days as the legislative session wraps up, really trying to push to get more accessibility built in to our voting system here in Texas. But it's a tall order in this session because we're actually at the same time fighting to stop from having barriers put in place. We still think it's worth every effort and the amount of time we put into working with everyone across the state and all the other organizations to slowly organize our groups. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to people deciding that they want to have a say in how their government's run, what resources they have available to them, and how they want their future to play out. If we don't vote as a group and the disability community isn't recognized as a group, it makes us harder to reach out and get those resources that we want in the future. We have to have a seat at the table, and the way to do that is all of us voting at the end of the day. We're also, during the legislative session, we've been hosting what's called Raise Your Voice events. We had done 2 prior sessions of these before this legislative session started, and we've grown. This is our 3rd round, and we've been hosting them basically every Monday during the legislative session to bring people up to date on which bills are coming to the floor or being debated, and trying to really narrow in on the ones that are moving at that moment and give people actions that they can take that week. So we're growing this group of people who are weekly, looking at, here's something I can do right now to take action. And we're giving them the step-by-steps on how to do that. And then we kind of debrief at the end of that. And at the next week, we run a poll to see, were you able to reach out to a legislator? Did you get a response? And a lot of the work that people are putting into this, we've seen positive gains already. Some of the stories after the winter storm that were brought up to us during these events, made it farther and made it into the legislators' hands, and, are helping craft policy. So we want to invite anyone who wants to attend. They're every Monday at 2:00. You can go on our website and log on, and you'll see Raise Your Voice, and you basically just sign up. And, we do the first 30 to 40 minutes is the whole advocacy team at CTD really trying to give you broken down what's going on that week, and what you can do. And then we break up into small groups and discuss different advocacy styles and ways we could go about the issues. And we've gained a lot of insight from our members, and that's really helped us in how we target our work up at the Capitol. So we definitely want to invite people to do that. But advocacy work, it's a continual process, and it's something that people have to start kind of feeding, and moving through and doing to get comfortable with. But it's those stories, those personal stories, that really make a difference when it comes to crafting good policy and getting legislators to talk about these things. And advocacy and voting are probably the 2 most important things we can do as a community. And CTD wants to help anyone in Texas that wants to do that in any way they can.
Thanks for joining us with this episode of Use Your Power. On our next episode, we'll focus on what's happening in the Texas legislature before the session ends May 28th. Check out our handles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram in the description below, or email us directly at revuptx@gmail.com. Don't forget to leave us a comment, feedback, suggestions, like us, and subscribe. Remember to use your power